All right, so here's the deal. We have been in this series where we've been doing a journey through the book of Philippians, but since it's Father's Day, we kind of wanted to call an audible a little bit, call a little bit of a timeout, and do something a little bit unique for Father's Day, which I'll tell you about here in a second. But I will say I was inspired from two different verses in the book of Philippians that I want to share with you guys really quick. Now in Philippians chapter 2, which Tyler talked about last week, there happened to be kind of two references where Paul, who wrote the book of Philippians, talks about sending to the church in Philippi two men that he holds in very high regard, one by the name of Timothy and the other one by the name of Epaphroditus. That's a mouthful, right? And he says, I'm going to send these two men to you, and I want you to give them an audience. I want you to listen to them. And he basically says, I want you to listen to them because of the type of men that they are. Now, in today's day and age, a little bit, when we talk about men and we go to conferences or events and we celebrate men, we always look at their successes, right? We say, you should listen to this man because of all the things he's accomplished or all the degrees that they've earned or all the money that they've made. But in the Bible, the kingdom's an upside-down kingdom. And God looks and talks about things a lot differently than just about earthly successes. He really focuses on the type of person you are. So let me read a couple verses to you really quick. So this is Paul talking about Timothy, and he says in Philippians 2, verse 21, and the verses will pop up here on the screen, it says, all the others, so all the other people, all the other men, care only for themselves and not for what matters to Jesus Christ. But you know how Timothy has proved himself. Like a son with his father, he has served with me in preaching the good news. Let me read one more verse, Philippians 2:29. Welcome him in the Lord's love and with great joy, and give him the honor that people like him deserve. You see, God's kingdom is very different. It's very unique. The metrics for success is really three different things. It's the type of character you have, the way you treat other people, the type of integrity you have. It's the love or devotion you have for Jesus, and the way you serve other people. And those are the metrics you see in the Bible for what really makes a man. And it doesn't matter what kind of degrees they have, doesn't matter how successful they are at their job, doesn't matter how rich or famous, doesn't matter how popular. None of those things really matter. It matters about who you are, type of man, your devotion to Christ. So what we decided to do today is bring up three men who I think fit that criteria. They are men who love Jesus. They're men who serve other people. They are men of great character. And we're going to do a little interview. So if you were here on Mother's Day, it's very similar to what we did on Mother's Day. So I want you to give a round of applause to three Mikes. So Mike, and Mike, would you guys come up for us, please? You know, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed sometimes, so I wanted to make it really easy for the interview, so I just asked three men really with the name Mike. So this is Mike. Mike, how you doing? Mike, you got your mic?
I got my mic.
All right, Mike.
Got my
How
mic.
you doing? Mike, it's good to see you.
Have you met
Mike, have you met Mike? Mike. All right, so these are the Mikes. And like I said, they kind of represent different stages of life, but these are all men who I would hold in high regard, both for their character, for their devotion to Christ, and the way that they serve other people. So first of all, before we get started, Mikes, we'll start here. We'll go down the line. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family.
I'm Mike. I'm Mike Johnson. I have a beautiful, wonderful wife of 50 years this year.
Woo! That's a big deal.
So obviously I'm not the young one in the group. So I have 3 daughters, wonderful daughters, and 9 grandchildren. 2 of them were on stage today playing in the praise
right.
band.
So Zach over here and Caleb over here are his grandkids.
Right. Got a great family.
That's awesome.
Hi, my name is Mike Thompson. I'm, I guess, the middle child here. On Father's Day, I've got my lovely wife, Missy, out there.
Hi, Missy, wherever you're at.
My son, Cameron, my daughter, Peyton. Then I have 2 other daughters who are in other places in the world right now, enjoying life, a little bit older. I've been married for 5 years this year, remarried for 5 years this year, and I'm just grateful for the Stateline churches, the opportunity to dig in here in a family way. We've got a group that meets at our house that when we started the group, we weren't sure how things were going to go. God sent us the people that make up the group that we meet with or met with before this group ended. And Father's Day, it means an awful lot because we talk about parenting, and we think sometimes that we live in this microcosm that we have the only trials and tribulations, we have the only struggles until you meet other people and hear their story. And in a nutshell, that's what Stateline is for us. We've gotten to know people in the front row. We've gotten to meet people in the middle row. We've gotten to meet people in the back row. And we can honestly say that we're not as strange as maybe we felt we were when this whole thing started, that life is tough and people make mistakes and God overcomes, and we're a family in the church way here as well.
That's
grateful
awesome.
for that.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else think Mike's got the Barry White thing going on with the voice? You're going to sing us a song later.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Mike, your turn.
Yeah, if I can brag on these guys.
Whoa, introduce yourself. We don't know your name.
My name is Mike Lentini.
There it is.
And if I can brag on these guys, I lead the host team here, and I've got the privilege of serving with these guys. Our hallways are friendlier and more welcoming because of them. And there's a theme with the three of us. We all have beautiful wives. My wife's name is Anna. We've been married for 6 years this year. And we've got two beautiful little girls. I've got a 4-year-old daughter. Her name is Phoebe. She is wildly energetic and doesn't stop talking, and I mean that in a really good way. And then we have a
Until it's
girl.
not good, right?
And then we have our youngest. Her name is Elizabeth, and she'll be a year old actually in about a week. And there's something extra sweet about her. She's content. She's always smiling. She kind of brightens up the room. And yeah, so that's my family. We hope to continue growing that family. And yeah.
Awesome. All right, so before we get started into some of the more serious content, just as a little bit of an icebreaker and for people to get to know you guys maybe a little bit more, share maybe a funny story or a crazy memory or a dad moment that you've had with either your father or as a father that would maybe kind of lump us into your world a little bit here. So who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go first.
All right.
Okay, I'll be the first, Mike. Well, I've been an educator all my life, 36 years, and I was principal of a building, and my wife had a daycare, and so any phone calls about the kids came to me, and I was supposed to handle it because she's got the kids at home, very important job. So one day I got a phone call from the school nurse, said, your daughter has just come to my office, and she's all blue. She just finished physical education, and is there something wrong? Does she have heart problems or what's going on with her? And I said, no, I don't think so. Well, maybe you need to take her to the doctor and find out what's going on. So I left school and picked her up and took her to the doctor, and we stopped at the clinic and get her in the office, and doctor comes in, looks at her and goes, oh, I don't know, what's going on? So every doctor in the clinic came in, every nurse came in and looked, and they're all like, what's going on with her? So finally, one of them decides, oh, you know what? We'll take some alcohol and rub on her face a little bit, and
where were you
it
at?
came off, you know? Wow. Well, here's the story. She had brand new jeans on, and she was running outside, and she put her hands in her pockets, and she went to her mouth. And so the doctors all kind of huddled together and go, oh, we're going to call this bluosis. And it's in her jeans.
Oh, dad joke.
And
yes!
And that's what they said. So we get home with my daughter. Now we get home. My wife said, what was it? I go, oh, she's got bluosis. Go, oh, what was that fatal or what's going on? Well, it's in her jeans. And they go, and then she, oh, come on now. So we told her the rest of the story.
That's awesome.
I'll go next.
All right.
At this time, we've only got one little girl, Phoebe. Phoebe's 2.5, and she got in the car from what we call school. She tells my wife that her friend has a boyfriend, and her friend's boyfriend buys her nice things. So my wife sends me that in a text message. And I was at work at the time, so the people I'm working with, I say, I gotta go, I've got something to take care of. So I go home, and my wife and Phoebe are outside on the back porch. So I go back out there, and I go down to my daughter's level, and I put her on my knee. And I said, Phoebe, does your friend have a boyfriend? And her head's kind of down, and she said, yeah. I said, does he buy her nice things? And she says, yes. So I said, Phoebe, who takes you out on daddy-daughter dates? And she says, Daddy. I said, Phoebe, who buys you nice things? She says, Daddy. I said, Phoebe, who's your boyfriend? She looks up at me and smiles and said, Daddy. So Mission accomplished.
Yeah, way to go.
And I went back to work. So I gave my wife a kiss and went back to work.
My story goes back to the year 1979. It's part of my childhood with my dad. We didn't get to do a lot with him because he worked all the time, had 5 kids in private school, and Dad was always working. But he took me and my best friend at the time, 3rd grade, 4th grade, something like that, to a Chicago Cubs game. And he had an old car. It was a mid-1970s Oldsmobile Cutlass, big wide back tires and posi rear end and all kinds of fun stuff. And we're driving down the highway, headed towards field day. We didn't know at the time, but it was field day, so we were going to get to actually go down on the field and meet the players. That was back when Dave Kingman, Steve Oniveris played third base with a big chaw in his side cheek, and Barry Foote played catcher, and Bill Buckner played first base. We had all these guys that are the big stars from back in the day in the Cubs organization. We didn't know it at the time we were going to be able to get down on the field. Well, we're tooling along, and Dad's sitting in the front seat talking to my friend's dad, and there's 4 of us on the way in there, and my friend Keith's dad said, "Oh my gosh, Mike, you're going to miss the exit. That's it right there." And I mean, we're on 90. We're flying down the highway, and we were bracing like, okay, the car's going to lurch. We're going to hit the brakes and come screeching to a halt and then get over. Well, he mashed the gas, and the back tires break loose. The car spun sideways across 3 lanes of traffic, and he zipped across 2 lanes to get into the off-ramp. Freaked me out, but excited like crazy. It kind of set the tone for the rest of the day.
That's awesome. Well, very good. All right, we're going to shift gears now a little bit. So even not as much, I'm going to ask you guys a question, but it's not as much about dad and parenting, but more just about being a man in today's society. But it's pretty well known that most men look to the earthly metrics and success as like what defines them as a man. But you guys know that character is what defines you as a man. Why do you think it's so easy to fall into the temptation of chasing earthly success as opposed to developing character?
I think that it's because if most men are kind of born into competition, and we can easily see success. Our culture defines it as a particular house or the kind of car that we drive, and so it's easy to get sucked into pouring a lot of time and energy into that rather than character, because character can easily go unseen, though obviously, as we know, has a ton more value than our material things that we have.
Yeah, for sure. And thinking of character, how would you define that? Like when you think about a man today and they should have character, if you were to say, well, what are those traits that a man should have?
Well, I really believe that integrity is right at the top. You have to do what you say, and I think that's really important in the family. And it deals with being a father in the fact that, my wife told me don't use my hands to talk. So anyway, integrity is really important. If you tell your children that you're going to do something, then you make sure that you're going to do that. I think that's really important. And last week, Tyler talked a lot about humility. And again, I loved what he said about your children. You do something wrong, even the youngest, to say, "Hey, I'm sorry. I missed it. I really goofed up." And to get in, and that teaches the young ones that is so important, no matter what age, that you do make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But when you make a mistake, you're humble enough to say, "Hey, I really blew it."
Do you think it's hard for men to say they're sorry?
Oh, is it hard for men to say you're sorry? Just ask your wives. Sometimes, they know the first day you were married, 50 years ago. I remember. But yes, it is very difficult. It's something you have to grow into or a part of, is to make sure that you're working towards that. I think that's the most important thing. You're working towards that, being humble and saying you're sorry, and that's something that has to grow.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you guys. So in thinking of character, integrity, humility, how do you cultivate that? So, you guys are on the journey, you guys are dads, so how would you cultivate something like that in your life? Or if somebody said, well, how do I cultivate character into my life? What would you tell them?
How do you cultivate it in your own life?
Yeah.
I think your prayer life is the biggest part of it. Beginning every day with with time on your knees, figuratively or literally, being able to be humble enough to recognize that you need help. That it's not something that is easy to do. Nobody's perfect. You make mistakes, but there's forgiveness. Part of that living out the integrity is the humble side, and I think humility is key because you realize that yes, there's a competition. Yes, I'm going to win here. Yes, I'm going to lose here. The playing field is even. You look at society in general, and we're held to this standard that, well, there's a Rolex, or there's a Mercedes-Benz, or there's a 3-story house and a white picket fence and the 2.2 kids and a dog, that kind of thing. But reality is that not everybody's going to achieve that.
Yeah.
And reality is that you don't need that in order to be successful. And the humility part is, I think, the biggest for me, because you go through life living as though you're held to a standard, but with the knowledge that you may not necessarily get to what society thinks is that benchmark. But as long as you pillow your head at the end of the day and you're good with your Heavenly Father, you're good with everybody.
Yeah, that's good.
Did I live
Well
today?
said.
Did I live today in a way that God says, "Yep, you made it"?
And this kind of goes along with both what you guys are saying. We talk about connection a lot here at church, and I think that people, they look to us and they admire our strengths, but we all connect through our weaknesses. And Mike, you talked about it. Middle Mike talked about small group, and so being humble and being genuine are really important when it comes to connecting with other people, because you can't have deep, meaningful connections with our Father in heaven or with even in a small group if you're not genuine and humble.
Yeah.
I go back to fathers having little babies, and I go back to when think about a child being so young. They get to know us as parents so well, so early. And that just really is important from the standpoint of knowing. People know each other. They know. You look at kids, they know when adults like them. I mean, I've been around kids all my life. They genuinely know. And I think the same thing is true with adults, and they know a person's character. I mean, they get to know them, and by connecting, as Mike and Mike said, that indeed you get to know somebody and you see the connection there as to their character. It's important.
Well, this is so a little segue here, but so relationships then matter, right? So connecting to certain individuals and having people in your life that help cultivate character and hold you accountable to character, and having the right types of friends. So how have friendships impacted your ability to develop your character and other relationships?
For me, my relationship with Christ came out of some brokenness, out of a divorce when I was in junior. My parents got divorced, and God surrounded me with a ton of men that were interested in helping me become successful and pouring into me. And then also just within the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, it was a game changer for my wife and I when we decided to get plugged into a small group. With that comes a lot of accountability, and just the fact that we know that we can be known by a small group of people and feel completely comfortable with them, and they love us regardless. So
That's cool.
I think vulnerability is hard, at least for me. I don't know if you can classify it as a male or a female thing, but to be open and honest with somebody and have them still like you when they know who you really are.
Sure.
That's huge. I think the small group thing for us.
So people don't think about men actually dealing with that sometimes, that we do care what people think and we want people to like us. It is something that we all wrestle with.
But we say, "Oh, I don't care."
Yeah.
But we say that, but we really do care.
Yeah.
We really do care a lot what people think.
Absolutely. All right, let me shift gears. Let me ask you guys another question. This can pertain to being a man or a dad, so you can look at it from both angles. But what do you think, and you can come from your own personal life, but what's your greatest or your biggest personal challenge as a man and or a dad that you felt or struggled with over the years?
I'm sorry. The greatest challenge for me was everybody has a God. Everybody has a God. My God was golf. And so when I came to know the Lord, I had to realize that it was either Jesus or golf. It couldn't be. I couldn't worship both. And so I had to get that right. And so that was a real
And
struggle.
you are a phenomenal golfer. I don't know if people know that, but you.
Well, I work at it. I have for
city
a long, long
championships,
time.
right?
A few, yeah.
Back in the day, so
Yeah.
I taught him
So
everything. he knows.
that is something that I really, yeah. All of it. All of it, yeah. But you really have to, everybody has that struggle in realizing, number one, that you have that you have a God, and making sure that you have the right God, and making sure then that you spend time with the one true living God, and that's the most important thing.
Wow, that's well said.
For me, I think the struggle has always been consistency. Where there are seasons in life and there are times where, oh God, I just want to press in and I just want to get to know you more. I just want to be the man of God you want me to be. And then he blesses you and business picks up, and then you don't pray every day, you pray every other day. You pray every 3 days, pray every 4 days. Being consistent in your walk is tough when you have kids and you have family and you have life and you have business and you have work and you have goals to try to achieve. It's huge, but I think it's ultimately for me been the most important thing. The periods of my life that have been the most blessed and that have been the most rewarding and rewarded have been the times where I've been the most consistent spiritually.
It's good. Mike?
Yeah, the most challenging season I think that I've been through was shortly after our second little girl was born, and it was just managing life in general, managing a healthy marriage, managing my relationship with my oldest daughter, supporting my wife in having our second daughter, managing friends and work and all of that. And I remember asking a friend of mine, so how do you do it? How do you, for example, how do you cut the grass? When you have all these kids, like how do you get stuff done around the house? And he kind of smiled and he had just said, well, it's because I've got a really strong wife. I've got a really amazing wife. And I thought, well, I have that. My wife's a rock star. She's an amazing mom, but she is not my God and I am not her God. Mike said it, the most important thing that we can do is to have meaningful connections with our Father, whether it's through prayer or reading our Bible. I think those are some of the more obvious. We all have other ways that we connect with our Savior, and for me, a hobby of mine and a gift is running. And so when I'm in that, when I'm running and I'm disciplined in that, I'm connecting with our Father.
Yeah, this is important to highlight. There's you can't put God in a box. You don't connect. He created everything. So everything that is good and that blesses us, we can give glory back to Him through it. And running is one of those things that is awesome for you, right?
I don't like that.
Greg,
I don't either.
I'd be amiss if I didn't mention, because I think there's a lot of people out here who are going through struggles or know somebody. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, multiple myeloma cancer, and I went through stem cell transplant. Definitely the toughest physical thing for me to go through, but I chose to walk with the Lord closely. At this point, I would say if I had an option to go back to that or just wipe that out of my life, I'd go back and have that, because I was so close to the Lord during that time. I just was so close. And like you said, Mike, the further you get away from that situation, you kind of like, oh, I forgot to pray today, or I forgot. Things are good. So, do I need God? I'm so I didn't do it, but boy, you need God all the time. Yeah. All the time.
Well said. And you're doing good, right? Healthy?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Because people out there are probably wondering, well, is he okay?
I'm okay.
He's okay. All right, so now let's go global here for a second. I asked you what your own personal challenges are. What do you, as you look at the landscape of manhood or fatherhood, what are the epidemics? What are the things that you think these things are really going to hurt the ability to have character or make a difference in a kid's life? Or what are the challenges that are facing men in today's society?
I think and I don't like to talk in general terms that often, but I think I think that it's the fear of responsibility. when you get married, there's, you guys that are married, you know this, there's a huge responsibility that you have. Shortly after, it was actually the very next day after I got married, and I don't know if I've ever told anyone this. If I have, I've only told my wife, and so I'm going to get real vulnerable with us as a church.
Wow.
But yeah.
Yeah. We're
You're
going
scared
there.
of what I'm going to say, aren't you? But I remember the very next day, I started crying. I ran upstairs. I didn't want my wife to see. I started crying because I felt the weight of the responsibility that I was no longer dropping my wife or girlfriend off at her parents' house and her being under the protection of her parents. She was now under the physical and I believe spiritual protection of me. And so there's a huge weight that comes with it. And then you have kids and the responsibility of pouring into your kids and sharing with them, modeling to them who Jesus is. And I think that our culture, I think men, tend to get scared of that. And what I would say, though, is that God has given you and given me, given us exactly what we need today with what he has given us trust in. And our job is to use our gifts to multiply them for his purpose, not for our own purpose, and to look at other people and look at their gifts. So yeah.
Yeah. I totally just echo that. When Jack, my oldest son, right before he was born, I had this like anxiety attack, like, I'm going to be a dad, and everything I do, they're going to want to emulate, and that terrifies me that they would copy me, as it should, right? And I just remember thinking, this is a big responsibility. So I remember, and what it did is it forced me to just surrender all of that to God and say, he's your child before he was ever my child, and acknowledge that, and then just trust him for the guidance.
I think the real major problem, or one of the major problems that we have, is we are bombarded with news and fake news, whatever you want to call it, but it's out there in the mind. All of our minds are subject to whatever we choose it to be, and so we need to make sure that we're choosing that our minds are in the right place, because there's so much out there that is trying to tell us that the world is greater than anything or anybody, and we know that greater is he who is in us than anyone or anything in the world. And we just have to remember that, because it looks like, oh my goodness, the stock market's going to crash, or we're going to go into World War III, or all of those things. It's so negative out there that we have to really work hard to stay positive. But we have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like when God created the heavens and the earth, he's like, man, everything is going to hinge on that New York Stock Exchange. Yeah. Everyone's future will just be predicated on that one thing, that ticker. He had his bigger plan in mind, obviously.
I think just confusion is probably the biggest thing that I see. Just so many opportunities. Life is so fast-paced. When you look at it nowadays, it's not just. I was thinking back and talking yesterday at Father's Day with my in-laws, and talking about how life has changed since I was 13, and since Dad was 13, and since his dad was 13, and how much faster paced everything is right now. This microwave society, where not only do people graduate and decide, I'm going to buy a house, and we're going to have this house that is like my parents' house now. We're going to leapfrog over the 30 years plus of working hard and showing up to work every day and doing it the right way, and earning your way through and achieving that way. But you also have, honestly, the devil at work saying, well, if I can't beat them face on, then I'm just going to confuse them. I'm just going to keep them busy over here doing this, so that they can't face getting up on Sunday because they're tired. They're going to sleep in this week. They're going to do this differently. They're not going to commit to a small group. They're not going to commit to being a good friend because they don't have time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my go-to is, I'd love to this or I'd love to that, but I'm really busy. And here's 8 things I can list off on a hand and a half that are important things. I mean, it's all valid, and it's all things that we need to do, but keep it simple and train up the children in the way they should go, so they don't forget about the Lord, and just fulfill what you were meant to do. You don't have to
most of our to-do lists are not who we are, it's what we do, right? We put the 10 things on there I need to do today, but none of them are really cultivating who I am. It's cultivating what we do, and And thus the struggle, right? Where we're more worried about staying busy and the things we have to do versus who we want to be as a man, and cultivating that integrity and that character.
I think what Mike said, the biblical verse that we raised our children with was train up a child in the way he should go, the way she should go, with 3 girls. But that was always a big part of what we believed in and what we did. And my wife reminded me the other day, and we said to our girls, every time they would go out with a boy or go out somewhere that was, we'd say, remember who you belong to. Remember who you belong to. Not to us. You belong to Jesus.
Well, Mike's daughters belong to him. We've already established that he's the boyfriend, so.
I prefer Prince, but I let him call me boyfriend.
All right, we're kind of running short on time, so quickly, I mean, because a lot of what we're talking about here is not focusing on what we do, staying consistent, having focus, not being confused. So when you think about what's a discipline then a man should have in the regular rhythm of life that would help them focus on what's really important? Prayer, we said that. I know prayer is one of them, but even thinking outside the box, so even beyond prayer, what would be a discipline?
I really believe that prayer is really important, reading the Bible, but I believe a discipline that's really great is reading. I'm talking about reading a book, keeping alive, reading a book. They've always said that millionaires read a book a month, billionaires read a book a week.
I read one every day. What's that say about me, Mike?
Wow.
Just kidding, I don't.
But I really believe that reading things that self-help is great, but just keeping sharp that way, that's really helped me.
Working the mind, yeah. Anything else? All right, last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. What advice would you give a new dad or a dad in maybe the same stage of life that you're in?
I would speak to the younger dads. So if you're a young dad, and that means that maybe some of your friends also don't have kids, and so you may feel kind of left out at times, but I would say always remember that after your relationship with Christ is that your wife is your number 1 responsibility, and then your children are your number 2, and friends are so important. God's blessed me with some amazing friends. But friends come after your responsibility to your family.
Yeah.
I would say for those that are a little older, well, maybe a lot older, but I really think that being active, do what you can with your children, and remember, I'm always reminded I'm still my girl's dad. Even though they're older, I will always be their dad. And then my grandchildren, trying to keep up with them, but be involved, be totally involved. You had a couple of people a few weeks ago talked about how involved they are here, and regardless if you're involved in church or their activities, but be involved no matter what age.
That's good.
I would kind of partner with what Mike said about making sure that in a family that you make time for your wife. First and foremost, that no matter what else happens, yes, the kids are your blessing and raised the right way, but you need that solid partner. And if you don't make time, if you don't watch out and safeguard your marriage, who else is going to do it for you?
Yeah.
It's got to be the priority.
And I look at 50 years of marriage, and some people have said, how did you do it? How did you manage to get to 50 years? Because I put my wife first. And the kids saw that I loved her, and they saw that. We displayed that, and my love for her has always been the strongest.
Yeah.
And then came the kids, but my wife was first.
One of the things, I don't remember who told it to me, I did not think of this myself, but somebody told me once, the greatest gift a man can give his kids is to love their mother. Amen. And it's really true to model that and show even the character traits that we talked about to your wife, and then let that trickle in. And the kids are watching everything, right? They see it anyways, and they know. So would you guys help me thank these guys here?